Hey folks, this is Sean Bagshaw from Outdoor Exposure Photography and Photo Cascadia. In this tutorial, I'm going to share a powerful dodging and burning technique that was recently shown to me by my friend and renowned Photoshop expert Mac Holbert. Mac's company, The Image Collective, produces highest quality fine art prints for museums, photographers, and artists around the world. I'll include a link to The Image Collective in the video notes on my YouTube channel. Dodging and burning, or lightening and darkening as Mac prefers to call it, to enhance existing light and shadow, to guide the eye, or to increase depth and contour is a technique I commonly use. Both in Lightroom and Photoshop, there are many different ways to make localized lightening and darkening adjustments. One of the most popular with photographers is the 50% blended gray layer method. This is a technique I've demonstrated in several of my tutorials, and I've linked to a couple of those from my YouTube channel in the video notes. The basics of the 50% blended gray layer technique are to create a 50% gray layer, we could call this one Dodge, set to the overlay or soft light blending mode and filled with 50% gray. Then this layer can be painted on with white to lighten or black to darken. This technique works great, but Mac pointed out a distinct limitation to me. Often, after using the 50% gray layer method to lighten or darken, it would be great to be able to make further adjustments to the lightened or darkened areas. For example, say I wanted to adjust the contrast, saturation, or color balance of the areas I had either dodged or burned. Using an empty or transparent layer instead of a 50% gray layer will allow us to do just that. Here's how it works. I'll start by deleting this gray Dodge layer. And then I'll create a new empty layer by holding down the Alt or Option key on a Mac and then clicking the New Layer icon. I'll name this layer Dodge, and then I'll set the blending mode to Overlay. You can use either the Overlay or Soft Light blending mode. As with the 50% gray layer method, I generally like the Overlay blending mode for lightening or dodging and the Soft Light blending mode for darkening or burning. I find this maintains the best contrast, but I'd encourage you to experiment with both blending modes to see what gives you the look you want. And for this technique, we are not going to fill with 50% gray. So I'll just click OK to create that new empty or transparent layer. Now you can paint with a white or black brush just as you would with a 50% gray layer. I'm going to lighten, so I'm going to change my foreground color to white, and I'm going to up the opacity to 50%, and I'm going to decrease my brush size and keep a nice soft feathered brush. Now this is probably a higher opacity brush than I would normally use, but I want to do this quickly. And in my own workflow, I'd take more time and I would layer in these adjustments a little bit more incrementally and smoothly. But I just want to do it quickly so you can just very rapidly get an idea of what I'm doing. So you can see I'm just kind of highlighting the tops of some of these trees and bushes down here in the foreground to give them some more contour and to bring out the highlights. So there's the effect of the dodging or lightening that I just did. So what's the difference, you might ask? Well, because this technique adds pixels to an otherwise empty layer, after you're done lightening or darkening, you can now hold down Control or Command and click on the layer to load the painted areas as a selection. That selection perfectly matches the areas I just dodged. Now, with the selection loaded, I can make a new adjustment layer. For demonstration purposes, I'll make a Levels adjustment layer. And the mask will reveal only the areas that were painted in the empty layer. Now I can make a Levels adjustment that will be constrained by the mask to only affect the lightened areas. This enables me to fine-tune the contrast of the lightening that I did. But I'm not limited to just levels adjustments. I could load that same Dodge layer selection and use it to create a mask on any type of layer. For example, I could load the selection and then make a hue saturation adjustment layer, and use that to make adjustments to the saturation of those dodged areas. I'm going to push it beyond where I normally would, just so you can see it well in the video. So that dodging selection could be applied as a mask to any type of adjustment layer or even a pixel layer, so that any possible adjustment you use in your workflow could be targeted directly to areas you have either lightened or darkened. As a final step, I like to add the dodge or burn layer and all related adjustment layers into a group. So I select them all, and then I hold down the Shift key and click the group icon to add all those layers into a group. And I could call this my dodge adjustments group. And now I can adjust the opacity of that entire group to dial in just the amount of that dodging adjustment that I want in the foreground. I generally keep my dodging and burning separate so I can control them individually. To add darkening adjustments, I'd repeat the same steps. I'd start by holding down the Alt or Option key and clicking the New Layer icon. And I'd call this one Burn. And I'd probably set this one to Soft Light, because I usually like that for darkening, but you can choose and experiment and find out which works best for you. And then this time I would paint with a black brush. And I'm going to bring this one down to 20% and do this a little more incrementally. And I'm going to darken in a section of the sky here. So I'm darkening the sky. But once I've made that darkening adjustment, I can now hold down Control or Command on a Mac and click on that burn layer to load that as a selection. And I haven't painted in any of the pixels more than 50%, so you don't see any marching ants or selection lines, but I'll say, okay, I know that there is a selection loaded, and now I can make a adjustment layer. In fact, I'm going to use my TK panel to make a curves adjustment layer. And that curves adjustment layer comes with the mask that perfectly matches my burning. So now I can use the curve to fine-tune the contrast or the curve of that burning in that part of the sky. And if I wanted to work with the color of it as well, I could Control or Command click on it, load the selection, and then load a hue saturation adjustment layer, and adjust the hue and saturation of that part of the sky. In fact, I may want to bring down the saturation in that area a little bit. And now, just like before, I would select all of those layers that are connected and then hold down the Shift key and click on the group icon to add them to a group. Call these burn adjustments. And now I can adjust the opacity of those burn adjustments all together at once and bring in just the right amount. Now let's look at before and after. So that's before those adjustments and after. Like I said, I kind of pushed those pretty far for the video so you can really see the effect, but you can see how that works. And I won't go into it in this video, but if you know how to use the Apply Image dialog in Photoshop, you can also use that to apply the painted areas as a mask on a new layer without needing to use a selection as I've demonstrated it. I think the added fine-tuning and control over dodging and burning adjustments that this technique provides are exciting. I hope you think so too. Give it a try and let me know how it goes.